The last thing we're going to look at related to the Electoral College is something we call electoral power. Electoral power is the value of one person's vote for president in one state compared to another person's vote in another state. So this is really a comparison about how someone in, say, state of Oregon compares with, say, the state of Washington and how they vote for president in terms of the Electoral College. Now, there are two common ways we make this comparison related to electoral power. The first way is to calculate the electoral votes for a specific group of people in a state. Now, that specific group of number of people in a state, a good number to use would be the number of people in a single congressional district. It's just a little bit easy to use, and I'll show you why in a minute. Now, this first method I'm going to go over is what our book uses, and it's also what our homework in My Open Math uses. Let's use this fictional state that we had, or I should say fictional country with 3 states, orange, green, and magenta, that we had in a previous example to look at this calculation. So we're talking about, like for the state of Orange, we're looking at the electoral votes that someone in that state has, or the people in that state have, per a specific group of people. Now, in this country, there were 20,000 people in every congressional district. So the state of Orange, that had a population of 40,000, had 2 representatives because they had 2 groups of 40,000 people. So the way this calculation works is we're going to look at the electoral votes, and we're looking at the state of Orange here. We're going to look at the electoral votes that they had, which is 4, and we're going to divide that by how many groups of 20,000 people they had. They had 2 groups of 20,000 people. So we're going to take 4 divided by 2 to get 2. And what this is representing is that there are 2 votes for president for every 20,000 people. So for every 20,000 people in the state of Orange, they get 2 votes. So we could do this for each of these states, green and magenta as well. And let me just repeat, I'll do this in the table. We take the number of electors and we divide by the number of representatives. So the electors divided by the number of representatives, because the representatives is really telling us how many groups of 20,000 people we have. So in this case, we have the state of Orange having 2 votes for every 20,000 people. That's what that 2 is really representing. Now we do the same thing for green and magenta. Again, the electors divided by the number of representatives, because the representatives is how many groups of 20,000 people we have. So when we have 11 divided by 9, we get 1.2, I'm just rounding there, votes for every 20,000 people. And if we do this for magenta, 8 electors divided by 6 representatives, because there's 6 groups of 20,000 people in the state, this would give us about 1.3 votes for every 20,000 people. So when we think about it that way, and let's just compare these numbers, a group of 20,000 people in the state of Orange has more votes. They have more votes. They have 2 votes compared with, in the state of Green, 20,000 people have 1.2 votes. So what this means is that 20,000 people share 2 votes in the state of Orange, whereas 20,000 people share 1.2 votes in the state of Green. So you can see that this isn't equal, that these similar groups of people are sharing different number of electoral votes. That means that, in particular for Orange, because 20,000 people share 2 votes, a single citizen actually has a little bit, it's not a whole lot because we're talking about a lot of people, but each citizen in the state of Orange has a little bit more power toward electing the president, because 20,000 people share 2 votes in Orange compared with 20,000 people sharing 1.2 votes for president in Green. So Orange has more electoral power, and I should say a citizen in the state of Orange has more power. So this is the way that they talk about it in our textbook. But sometimes people have a little bit of trouble kind of getting that down. So I want to show you another way I've seen other textbooks talk about it. And so maybe between the two, one of them makes a little more sense to you. The other way is that you can actually calculate the number of residents that are in a state per the electoral vote in that state. So if we look at the number of residents, and again, we're using Orange as our first example, state of Orange, there are 40,000 residents. And if we divide that by how many electoral votes there are 4 electoral votes for every 40,000 people. That means that 10,000 people share 1 electoral vote. Okay, so 10,000 people in the state of Orange share one vote for president. So again, all I did was I took the population and I divided by how many electoral votes there were, divided by 4 to get 10,000 people. So 10,000 people share a vote. So these are the people that share a single vote. So one way to think about it is that each of those people in the state of Orange gets 1/10,000th of a vote for president. 1/10,000th of a vote for president. They get a really tiny bit of a vote, but they do get 1/10,000th of a vote for president. Now, in the state of Green, we can do the same thing. We could do their population divided by the number of electoral votes they have, which is 180,000 divided by 11. This time we do have to round off the number of people. I'll just go to the nearest whole number. It ends up being 16,364 people. So you have 16,364 people sharing one vote. So you have more people in the state of Green sharing a single vote. That means each of those people has a little less power, okay? Little less power compared to the state of Orange because they're having to share a single vote. 16,000 people share a single vote, whereas in Orange, only 10,000 people share a single vote. And you can continue this with Magenta. 120,000 divided by 8 electoral votes comes out to be 15,000 people sharing a single vote. So when you calculate it this way, what's actually better in terms of having more power is if you have a smaller number of people sharing a vote. So in this example, we have 10,000 people in the state of Orange sharing a single vote. That is much less than in the state of Green or the state of Magenta. So the people in the state of Orange, again, have more power in the Electoral College. Just a little bit more power, but they do have a little bit, they do have more power. A little bit, but it is more. Now, why is this? Why does a citizen in the state of Orange have more power? Well, it actually has to do with, sometimes people think it's about the representatives, but it actually has to do with the one thing that all of these states have in common, which is the senators. The way electoral votes are counted for each state in terms of how many each state gets is based on adding the representatives, which is based on population, to the number of senators, and the senators are not based on population. Every state, no matter how big or small, gets 2 senators. And so because that's part of the calculation and figuring out how many electors each state gets, and those senators make all the states equal, even though the populations are not equal. And though that extra number of senators, or those 2 senators that go into making up the electors, because those are the same for every state, that means if we wanted to go ahead and look at the population and compare it to senators, the state of Orange has 40,000 people for every 2 senators. That means that 20,000 people are actually represented by a single, well, they're represented technically by both, but you can think about for every one of those senator votes, there's 20,000 people there. And so, whereas in the state of Green, there's 90,000 people for every senator that the state has. So that the fact that you have senators not based on population influencing how many electors each state has is what makes the power between the states differ in terms of the Electoral College. And again, it ends up being an overall really simple rule. Citizens of states that have smaller populations will have more electoral power. So for instance, a couple of states with small populations, Wyoming, very small population, they have more electoral power than like the state of California, which has a very large population. Okay, you could say the same thing about Alaska and Oregon. Alaska has a smaller population than Oregon, and if you were to calculate the electoral power for Alaska and Oregon, a citizen in Alaska would actually have a little bit more electoral power in the electing of a president than a citizen of Oregon.